On this Tuesday night, flu season fears. New stress on an already strained healthcare system.
This fall winter is going to be extremely challenging.
How you can protect yourself and who's most at risk. A matter of life and death.
We found that it had metastasized very quickly.
The barrier some women face in getting tested for breast cancer. A professional athlete's uncertain fate in Iran.
I believe that punishment will come.
The escalating concerns for this competitive climber's well-being. And Mackenzie Scott's constant goal to give. The billionaire's generous donation mission.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's cold and flu season is ramping up and experts warn it could be severe. For the last 2 years, pandemic restrictions largely kept viruses at bay, but there are signs the flu is poised to stage its first real COVID-era comeback. In Australia, where the flu season has now passed, data shows influenza hit early and it hit hard. Peaking in June, it was the country's worst flu season in 5 years. Many hospitals in this country say cases are coming in earlier than normal, and health experts are warning children are particularly at risk. Jamie Mauracher has our top story tonight.
Inside this Ontario Children's Hospital, pediatrician Rod Lim is watching the makings of a perfect storm. Capacity concerns, staff shortages, and now an aggressive cold and flu season.
I don't know any person who's working in the emergency services who does not worry tremendously about what this fall winter is ahead for us, especially among children who have not been exposed to viruses for 2 to 3 years now.
Already, some pediatric hospitals are reporting increased admissions in respiratory illnesses.
Tonight is looking somewhat tight.
In Ottawa, the Children's Hospital's inpatient occupancy is at 120%.
When we're backed up in the emergency department, we can't get admissions up to the floor, keeping in mind that, most of these kids have something infectious, and so they need special rooms.
The hospital expanded a special health clinic to ease the burden after seeing Australia struggle with a spike of respiratory cases in recent months. Often a marker for what happens here, there, children under 9 reported the highest rates of illness. Physicians and public health experts are urging Canadians to be proactive.
It is good to know that influenza vaccines can be given at the same time as COVID-19 vaccines to people over 5 years of age.
But for parents whose young kids do get sick, they still face a unique hurdle. A cross-country shortage of over-the-counter pain and fever medication has persisted for months. At the Alberta Children's Hospital, emergency room staff have seen the problem push families into the ER unnecessarily.
It's really not helpful for patients or families to come to the emergency department to seek those medications because we don't have more that you can give at home.
Further strain on a system Lim isn't sure can handle much more.
We worry that we're going to get a call and not be able to send a child to a place where the help is going to be available.
A worst case scenario no doctor or parent wants to see become a reality. Jamie Mauracher, Global News.
Alberta is lowering the recommended age for breast cancer screening by 5 years. It's now among a handful of provinces and territories to offer regular screening to women under 50. But advocates say the guidelines don't go far enough and more Canadian women should have access to regular mammograms at even younger ages. Sarah Komadina reports.
The light part.
4 years ago, Sian Martin first started having back pain and couldn't find out why.
I actually read a story in a magazine about a lady that had back pain and her back pain was caused by breast cancer.
That's the math.
The 43-year-old mother of 3 found a lump in her breast. 1 year after her back pain started, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
I have metastases in my bones, pretty much from my skull all the way down.
To add to her devastation, she suspected the diagnosis months before.
She said, no, it's not likely to be cancer. You're young, you don't have a history.
The problem is that 17% of breast cancer occurs in the 40s. which is a large amount of the breast cancer out there.
Alberta has just lowered the age from 50 to 45 for women to begin getting regular mammograms. But even younger could save more lives. BC, PEI, Nova Scotia, and the Yukon all allow for self-referrals at 40. There is a push for every province to follow suit.
There are still women who won't survive, but you've got a 44% better chance. So give yourself that chance.
Many provinces follow the recommendation by the Canadian Task Force on Preventative Health Care that women who are under 50 and not at an increased risk do not need regular mammograms, but patients can ask for one. Dense Breast Canada stresses it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach.
Black, Asian, Hispanic women, their peak incidence of breast cancer is in the mid-40s compared to white women whose peak incidence is in the late 50s, early 60s.
As for Martin, she hopes sharing her experience will help women advocate for themselves.
If I'd started having mammograms at 40, my outcome could have been quite a bit different.
Sarah Komadina, Global News, Edmonton.
Some breaking news tonight out of Burnaby, BC, where an RCMP officer has been killed in the line of duty. Global's Kamil Kermali is at the scene. Kamil, what do we know?
Well, it's a somber mood here, the grief palpable among police officers who are now tasked with trying to figure out the circumstances around how one of their own was killed in broad daylight just before noon today. Now, what we know so far is that a female member of the Burnaby RCMP has been killed after a stabbing incident. Details on the victim are still limited, but sources have confirmed to Global News that the officer was assisting City of Burnaby bylaw with a call at a park. It's very quiet in this usually busy stretch of road in Burnaby, just outside Vancouver. And as people who live here trying to come to grips with what happened, there's the Burnaby Board of Education offices here near a baseball field and a small park nearby, a lot of townhomes off of this stretch of Canada Way as well. So it's unclear exactly where this happened. Meanwhile, BC's Minister of Public Safety is offering his condolences.
This is absolutely the worst news that could happen. And our hearts go out to the officer's family, the friends, the police officers every day who put their lives on the line. This is just absolutely the worst thing that could happen.
Minister Farnworth echoing a lot of what people are feeling here. Spoke to a couple of people who work at the Burnaby Board of Education here. They had tears in their eyes, even though they didn't know the female officer. Meanwhile, Neetu, this investigation still very much in its infancy. Back over to you.
Kamil Kermali in Burnaby, BC tonight. Thanks, Kamil. Ottawa's mayor was today's key witness at the inquiry into the federal government's invocation of the Emergencies Act back in February. Jim Watson, who will step down as mayor next month, says he welcomed the controversial legislation as his city wasn't prepared for the sheer number of vehicles that would eventually clog the downtown core.
We didn't have the capacity to move the trucks out because we had basically two OC Transpo large rig trucks, tow trucks. It sounds a little bit hokey, but when I came out of City Hall after the Emergencies Act, I saw a whole row of tow trucks parked on Laurier Avenue. I'd never thought I'd see the day where I'm so happy to see a tow truck.
Although he said he's grateful for the action, Watson also aired out numerous complaints he had with provincial, federal, and security officials during his hours-long testimony. Abigail Bimman reports.
For hours, Jim Watson spoke calmly and carefully.
We were a bit like the meat and the sandwich.
Ottawa's mayor has decades of political experience, but also just days left in office. And he voiced multiple concerns with local police.
One of the frustrations I did have with Chief Slowly when he said this is not going to be a police solution.
The province.
It was frustrating that the province was not as responsive.
And the feds.
My point was, I can't go and start criticizing the province if you still haven't given me a commitment for the number of officers we needed from the RCMP.
For not getting convoy trucks out of his city fast enough.
It was teetering on lost control. We lost control in the red zone. It was lawlessness.
Watson complained police were slow to tell him how many officers they needed. Once he got a number, a letter to the Ontario Premier shows he asked for 1,800 officers February 7th. Watson says it still took too long to act, and that Doug Ford wouldn't take part in meetings.
The Premier was adamant that he did not feel it would be useful to have 3 levels of politicians sitting around a table. I think he felt it would be a waste of time.
We've worked collaboratively with the mayor and the Prime Minister.
A readout of a February 8th call with the Prime Minister shows Justin Trudeau accused Doug Ford of hiding for political reasons.
I share the view that at the end of the day, both the Prime Minister and you heard the Premier yesterday of Ontario say that they were standing shoulder to shoulder.
Tuesday's exhaustive testimony wasn't just about placing blame. The mayor acknowledges there were many, quote, failure points along the way. And whether it was the city, the province, or the federal government, Watson says action didn't happen fast enough. Neetu?
Abigail Bimman reporting tonight. Thanks, Abigail. To Ukraine now. The war has entered a dangerous new phase, with Iran emerging as a key player in the conflict. It's widely suspected Iran is adding drones to Russia's arsenal, raising tensions with Western powers. Ukraine says it's moving to cut diplomatic ties with Iran after a wave of deadly drone attacks. And there are huge blackouts across the country from airstrikes on the power grid. As Eric Sorensen reports, Ukraine says the situation is critical.
Cleaning up in Kharkiv after a morning missile attack early today. In Mykolaiv, the aftermath of another Russian missile strike. While in Kyiv and other cities, they are facing new weapons, attacks by kamikaze drones that Ukraine and the West say are supplied by Iran, a new and destabilizing player in the war.
On one hand, you have Russia, which is taking part in a barbaric, illegal, and unjust invasion of another country. And on the other hand, you have Iran, one that is known for partaking in destabilizing violent actions in the region as well.
The Kremlin today said it has no information on the use of Iranian drones. And in Tehran, the government denies sending drones to Russia, saying it takes no side in the war. Though just 3 months ago, Russia's president left the country to visit with the Iranian leader. The use of Iranian drones signals to some a level of Russian desperation.
It shows a weakness in terms of military capacity, that Russia is not able to build these drones in sufficient quantities and quality themselves.
The new onslaught signals a turn by Russia to target civilians and infrastructure. Ukraine says 30% of its power stations have been destroyed in the last week. Blackouts are becoming widespread. The two sides are in an increasingly drawn-out fight in the eastern regions that are now claimed by Russia. So Russia appears to be mounting new aerial offensives. Missile strikes in Mykolaiv and Dnipro, and drone strikes are taking a toll in Kyiv and other cities.
Vladimir Putin seems to be shifting from what was a purely military campaign of aggression to one that involves a terror campaign, which is directed largely at civilians, at infrastructure.
President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling again for more air defenses, and NATO says it will supply them to combat drones. Meantime, Ukrainians are protesting Iran's involvement in the war, but they are also preparing for what's to come, more Russian attacks, and what could be a cold, dark winter. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
And a Norwegian robotics company has released images it says show the extensive damage done to the largest route for Russian gas to Europe. The underwater footage shows the twisted and bent metal from a huge hole in the ruptured Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Police in Denmark suspect deliberate explosions blew 4 holes in the pipe and its newer twin Nord Stream 2 last month. The findings are similar to those of Swedish officials who've also been investigating the leaks. Russia is denying responsibility. The worries about an Iranian athlete's well-being. Coming up, why human rights activists are concerned for Elnaz Rekabi's safety. For more than a month now, protests have flared up in Iran and around the world following the death of Mahsa Amini. Those in power have condemned the protests, saying countries like the U.S. are to blame for inciting terror and chaos. And now there are questions about the whereabouts of a well-known Iranian athlete, a climber who recently competed in South Korea without her hijab. Redmond Shannon takes a look at why human rights activists are worried about her safety.
Elnaz Rekabi is the latest face of Iran's hijab protests. On Sunday, she competed at the Asian Climbing Championships in South Korea without a hijab. Female athletes representing Iran are obligated to wear one. BBC Persian reported Monday that friends had been unable to contact her. An apology appeared on her Instagram account Tuesday. It said her headscarf fell off after she had to take part in an event unexpectedly. She said she was flying home. Rekabi's Instagram feed shows multiple pictures of her covering her hair, but rarely in a full hijab. Human rights campaigners think her actions were no accident.
What I personally think is that she definitely tried to show her solidarity with her sisters in Iran.
Climbing's world governing body says it supports athletes' right to freedom of expression. Other women have been banned from sport in Iran for not dressing according to regime rules, like soccer player Shiva Amini.
That punishment will come definitely if this courage goes away, and most importantly, what will happen is that her professional career will be at risk.
The Iranian embassy in Korea says it denies all false news about Rekabi's situation, without referring to any reports in particular.
The Islamic Republic has an obligation to protect children's right to life under any circumstances.
On Tuesday, the United Nations said as many as 23 children are among those who have died in the crackdown on anti-regime protests over the past month. A movement sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini in custody. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Enduring summer in October. Ahead, when will British Columbia's unprecedented dry spell relent? When most people think about the British Columbia coast, one of the first things that comes to mind is rain and lots of it. But this year has been much different. It's now been more than 100 days since any significant rain fell. And as Aaron MacArthur reports, between the wildfire smoke and ultra-low water levels, conditions look more like mid-August than mid-October.
22,000 people on BC's Sunshine Coast have been living with severe water restrictions for more than a month. Under Stage 4 restrictions, residents and farmers have been banned from using treated water for all outdoor uses. With almost no rain since the beginning of July, the regional district has been forced to close the taps further. A local state of emergency has been declared. Now, non-essential heavy commercial users of water will be cut off.
The intent is really to focus on make sure that we have enough water for residents, for the hospital, for firefighting.
The district's pools will be closed. Breweries, cideries, and distilleries are named in the order, along with bottled water companies and concrete, cement, and asphalt operations. Businesses affected by the order will be compelled to stop using treated water. For Persephone Brewing, the water crisis has immediate impacts. There's enough stock on hand to last 3 weeks.
It's not just about our bottom lines, it's about trying to keep our people employed and trying to, contribute to our economy on the coast.
Since July 10th, the district of Sechelt has recorded just 9 millimeters of rain. The average for this period is 200 millimeters. BC has smashed temperature records for October, and smoke from forest fires is still creating air quality issues. Farmers have taken extreme measures by trying to conserve water. Grounded Acres Farm installing storage for roughly 34,000 liters of water. It was gone in 2 weeks. Without enough water to plant winter cover crops, the situation could still get worse. The viability of the business is at stake.
I'm looking at my bare field and I'm looking at a lot of rain coming down and I will lose my topsoil.
While there is rain in the forecast, it isn't nearly enough to recharge the reservoir. The level needs to come up 4 meters before restrictions can be removed. Aaron MacArthur, Global News, Sechelt, BC.
Sharing her fortune. Next, the multi-billionaire leading the way in giving it away. It is being billed as the Girl Scouts of America's biggest donation from a single donor since its founding in 1912. More than $80 million earmarked for the organization from billionaire philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. As Ross Lord reports, the historic contribution is just the latest in a long line of charitable gifts from the former First Lady of Amazon.
Like most billionaires, Mackenzie Scott would seem to have far more money than she'll ever truly need. But Scott is doing something many billionaires don't, generously sharing her wealth in a big way. Her latest charitable endeavor is the largest single gift in the U.S. Girl Scouts history. For Scott, it follows donations to hundreds of organizations, ranging alphabetically from groups that offer free legal advice to ones that invest in the potential of young people, and many, many others in between. 465 nonprofits converting $3.9 billion in gifts into services for others. Overall donations are more than twice that amount, from a woman who was once best known as the wife of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. Scott has rarely given interviews, but while they were still married, she discussed Bezos with talk show host Charlie Rose.
He offered me a job, but I interviewed with some other people, and I was offered a job in another department, too. So I ended up taking a different job, but then, as luck would have it, got assigned an office right next door to his.
She divorced Bezos in 2019. Her stake in Amazon is currently worth an estimated $33 billion US. But Scott has plenty of independent accomplishments. She's a Princeton grad, a mother of 4, an award-winning novelist.
You have wanted to be a writer for a long time.
A long time. Ever since I was 6 years old, actually. Yeah. I wrote my first book when I was 6.
But her gift for giving is defining her legacy. As a rule, she lets her actions speak for her, staying out of the spotlight, encouraging those interested in her philanthropy to seek out the organizations she invests in. Helping any of us can help us all, she wrote in a public post earlier this year. Scott has promised to give away roughly half of her fortune, which means billions more in donations are still to come. Ross Lord, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is the town of Rose Blanche Harbour, Lacoon, Newfoundland and Labrador. We love seeing your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching and hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a great night.